Alright, hey guys, how's it going? So we're going to go and start looking at the review for the quadratic equations test 2. And I won't be able to work every single problem just due to time, but I'm going to go ahead and see how many of these problems I can solve. So 1 through 9 is all just practicing the quadratic formula. Really quickly we'll talk about the quadratic formula, how to solve, and then just biggest mistakes, and we'll probably work only 2 or 3 of these, and then we'll jump down and move on. So quadratic formula, which again you'll have a formula chart once you show up to your test, or your teacher will give you your formula chart. So quadratic equation, x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So that's our equation. Anytime that you plug this into the calculator, and we'll talk about plugging into the calculator, hopefully you guys are pretty good at it by now, but anytime you plug it into your calculator, I always encourage my students to use a whole bunch of parentheses. So we have negative parentheses plus or minus parentheses squared minus 4 times 2 sets of parentheses all divided by 2 and then my a. Alright, so we plug it in this way, and then another part of solving your equations is figuring out your a, your b, and your c, and I always encourage my students to write it off on the side. That way you have your letters and you can just plug them in. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and solve, like I said, only a few of these problems. So let's go ahead and look at solving, let's do number 4. So x squared minus 32 equals minus 4x. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that problem over here. I apologize for the picture. I'm not sure what's wrong with the camera. Alright, so we can draw our line down our equal sign. We need to first, your steps, you have to make sure that it's set equal to 0. So if your equation is not set equal to 0, you can't go into 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to make sure that it's set equal to 0 first. So to set this equation equal to 0, it's easier to move this to the other side. So I'm going to do the opposite sign. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. This is going to go away. I have equals 0 on this side, and then I have 3 different terms, 3 different types of things. You just always want to remember to make sure that your 3 things never get mixed up. So your 3 terms or 3 types of terms are x squared, x's, and regular numbers. So these 3 things we should never combine. So x squareds, I only have 1 x squared, so I'm going to bring that down. My x's, I only have 1, so that's going to be plus 4x. And the numbers, I only have 1 of those as well, minus 32. So now that I've written it out this way, now I can write down my ABC. ABC for this one. Again, in the way that you would do this is, and it goes, as long as you put these in the right order, your ABC should also be in the right order. Your ABCs are the coefficients, or in other words, the numbers that are in front of these things. So the number in front of x squared, the number in front of x, and then the last one is just the number. So we start by looking at our equation. So the understood number in front of x squared, which in algebra you don't see it, but it's an understood 1. So we can go ahead and say that our a is 1. My b, which in this case, and I always circle it or underline it or something, it's the number in front of the x, which in this case is 4, positive 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put 4. And then my c is the number off by itself, and in this case it's a minus 32. So you can go ahead and set it that way. Once we have our a, b, and our c, we go in and we plug this in. So I always encourage, make sure that you guys write this down first and then plug it into your calculator. So negative, and then my b is 4, plus or minus 4 squared, minus 4 times a times c, so times 1 times negative 32. and then all divided by 2a, or in other words, 2 times 1. We then go to our calculator, and we plug this into our calculator. Make sure that you're doing alpha y equals enter. This sets up your fraction template, and different teachers tell students to do different things. I always tell my students to just type it in exactly how they see it. So we're going to do negative parentheses 4 plus second square root. And of course the plus minus, the first time you do plus, then the second time you do minus. It's pretty easy. Oops. Sorry, 4, make sure that the squared goes on the outside. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 32, all divided by 2 times 1. Alright, so here's the thing that throws students off. So first, the very first sign here, that should be a negative. The only minus that you'll ever have on here, well, I won't say ever, but the only minus sign that I use is going to be right there. That's minus. Everything else should be negative, except for when I go back and change that plus to a minus. But just make sure that you always do minus 4, and that you always put everything in parentheses. So my first solution should be 4. So anytime that you write your solutions, you just want to write them as x equals. So this one I would say x equals 4. That's one solution. To figure out my second solution, I have to retype this equation and then change that plus right there in front to a minus because of my equation. We have plus first and then minus. So lots of different ways to do this. If you just hit the second and then you hit enter again, it retypes it all for you and it lets you edit. So then you go back in, you edit a few of these, you edit that plus. All you do is just change it to minus, not negative, to minus. And then you hit enter, and then your second solution is negative 8. And those are your two solutions. So that's how we would go in and we would solve. We're going to go ahead and jump down to number 10 and number 11. This is most likely how they're going to show up on your test, something like this. So this way you have that, A, B, C, and make sure that you're filling that in. All right, so looking at number 10. With number 10, my equation is already set equal to 0, which we said should have been our first step. So since my equation is already set equal to 0, I can go in and I can label A, B, C. Remember that technically this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C. Now, anytime that you're working your problem, this is not enough. You always want to make sure that you write it up and down this way so you have it nice and clear on what that number should be. So x squared doesn't have a number in front of it, which is an understood 1. So we can go ahead and write 1 for A. My B in this case, and I always circle these and I always circle them with a sign. My B is a positive 10. So I don't really need the plus, but I'm going to go and write 10. My C, make sure that I get the sign, is a negative 24. All right, and then we jump into our quadratic formula. All right, and so we can go in and we can start plugging these in. So B's go in here, so we have, our B right now is 10, so I can put 10 there and 10 there. My A is 1, so A goes in there. C is negative 24, which goes in here, minus 24. And then my A is 1 down at the bottom. So then I go into my calculator and I just type this in. So I type in my equation, hit enter, I get 2, my second solution. Negative 12. So x equals and x equals, I can write 2 and negative 12. And that's how we would solve it. The biggest mistake is with a problem like number 11. This is where a lot of people will make mistakes, is they'll get overconfident and they'll just say, oh, A is 2, B is -2, and C is 12. Now, if you do something like this, you're making a mistake because you're ignoring the very, very first step, which is set this equal to 0. So if it's not set equal to 0, I can't go in and I can't name my values. What I would have to do then is draw my line down my equal sign. I notice that the 12 I can very easily move to the other side, so I can do -12. This side goes away. I'm left with 0. I'm going to go ahead and kind of clean it up and put it over here, so I have 0 on that side. On this side I have 2x squared minus 2x minus 12, the three types of terms. So I'm going to go ahead and just write them in order. And so now that they're in this order, now I can do A, B, C. So there's my A, there's my B, there's my C. So A was correct, B was correct, my C was the one that was messed up because I still had to move it to the other side. So my C should have been -12. From here we do quadratic formula. Alright, so we kind of draw our outline of it, and then we just plug in our values. So B is -2, so even though there's already a negative there, I still need to put the -2 in here. Right? So I have a negative parentheses -2, because that's my B. My B is -2, so I have to make sure that I put the -2 in there. Then I have -2 squared, or B squared, minus 4AC, so 2 and 12. Sorry, -12. And then all divided by 2 times my A, which in this case is 2. So then once again we go to our calculator and we type this in. Alright, so my first solution is 3. My second solution is -2. So I can go over here and say x is equal to 3 and x is equal to -2. Very, very similar to this problem, we would have to make sure that we draw the line down the equal sign and that we're able to move this term over to the other side. And then of course labeling and then putting these in correctly. I don't have a lot of time to show you guys the correct answer, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that the correct answer here should be C. So just double check your work. We're going to go ahead and work 13 really quickly. 13 says Michael incorrectly solved the equation x squared plus 3x minus 4 is equal to 14 by using the factoring method. Circle the mistake in Michael's work and rework the problem correctly. So basically whenever you factor, you still have to make sure that you set this equal to 0. And that was his mistake here, was that he did not set this equal to 0. If you don't set this equal to 0, then you can't solve by factoring, so we have to move that to the other side. And that was his main mistake. So what he should have done is minus 14, subtracted 14 from both sides. This goes away, this becomes 0. These two drop, so we have x squared plus 3x, and then -4 plus -14. A lot of students make mistakes in this part right here, so you want to make sure that you do -4 plus -14. That way you don't make any mistakes. You add these two together. You get -18. And then if you forgot how to factor, we do X box. Again, first, now that it's set equal to 0, I can do first and last. So we have x squared and -18. And then up top is a times c, which is 1 times -18, which is -18. And then down at the bottom we have 3. In my class, we use two equations. We always use the top number, so we're going to do negative 18 divided by x and negative 18 divided by x plus x. All right, and then you're basically looking for your bottom number in this last column over here. So in this case, I'm looking for 3 in the bottom column, or in the last column. So if I go down over, there's 3. So my factors should be these two. So it should be 6 and negative 3. All right, then I take these, I plug them in, make sure that when you plug them in that they have an x, so 3x and 6x. We then take these and we factor them out, so x squared becomes x times x. And then x, I always do it with fill in the blank, so x times blank gives me negative 3x, that blank has to be negative 3, and then x times blank is 6x, so that has to be 6. So then my factors here, which we're not done solving yet, factors here would be x minus 3 and x plus 6. We set them equal to 0, and then we set each one of these individually equal to 0. So we have x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 6 equals 0. And then we solve. Get the x by itself, so we want to add 3 to both sides. Positive 3, negative 3 cancel out, x comes down, so the first solution we have is x is equal to 3. Second one, same thing. I always put a box around my variable that I'm trying to solve. That way I know that that stays. To get rid of plus 6, it's opposite sign, so it's minus 6. That goes away, x comes down, so we have x equals negative 6, because 0 minus 6 is negative 6. So those are my two solutions. That's how he would solve that equation.